within that at-risk category to make sure they're making progress. So in that case, it is taught, but of course it's not the central focus of the course. Same thing in classroom management, which is our responsive learning environments class. You would assume that any professor helping students learn how to deal with behavior would, include strategies that are culturally responsive. But we can't guarantee that professors spend very much time on looking at risk students separately than the gen ed students. So literacy and language acquisition and development is teaching students, our pre-service teachers, student teachers, how to teach reading to both native English speakers and speakers of other languages who are English learners. So that is a class that can't help but address culture and culturally responsive pedagogy. Again, there's a lot to cover in a one 10-week course, so I don't think it's, although ELL strategies are a significant component of it, so are teaching reading strategies for all learners. So there's a lot to teach, and it's only one course, so it touches on a variety of learners of literacy and language, but it isn't completely devoted to diversity and inclusion. So, are those some good examples for you?
Yeah, I think that's perfect. I think the next question will kind of build on the discussion that you just had.
Sure.
The next question is looking at how are learning opportunities for developing racial identity and culturally responsive skills for teaching explicitly represented in course syllabi? I'm more interested in the explicit part of it.
Yes. Okay, let's see. So developing their own racial identity and discovering other identities than their own and using culturally responsive skills for teaching are written in the course objectives and then also repeated in the standards that are selected for the focus of the courses, and they are also part of the outcomes for the course. So those are spelled out in detail for every program, and it includes all the applicable standards for gen ed students and for special ed students and for students in the ELL category, and then the assignments, the key assignments for each course assess those skills and the development of our students in learning those skills. And that is all, we have really several pages delineating the specifics in our syllabi for what will be taught and what will be learned and how it will be assessed.
Great. So again, this next question kind of builds on what we've been talking about, but could you talk more about the specific learning activities and experiences within your courses for developing their culturally relevant practices and their culturally responsive pedagogy?
Yes, absolutely. So, I teach these kind of courses myself, so I'll just use my own class, diversity class or multicultural ed classes as an example. I provide articles, chapter readings, video clips as background and as homework assignments, and I try to spend our class time in sort of grappling with the readings in small groups or in partners or in whole group activities that get students increasingly aware of their own identities. I start a third of the class, the first third of the class is about who am I and what is my culture. And of course, I learned that lots of mainstream students who are working toward becoming teachers don't think they have a culture. So we do have some activities on identity and determining their heritage and ancestry and the identities and cultures and subcultures that they identify with. And we start broadly with some grouping strategies. I do some games, quote unquote, of sorting so that we can see the diversity within our own class by, if you were raised in an urban environment, go to this corner. If you were raised in a suburban, a small town, a rural area, and then they meet in those, they move into their corners and they converse with the students. Can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you.
They meet in these small groups and talk about what are the benefits and the drawbacks of the kinds of communities they were raised in. And then maybe we sort into socioeconomics that they grew up in. And we might have 6 or 8 different categories. And then we see that even in our mainstream college course, we have some students who'd experienced poverty or came from working class families or even were homeless. We find we have affluent students. We have students who were raised in middle class families or by single parents. So I just do this. I call it the class demographics sorting activity, and that keeps it not personal, but it gets their brains working around some of the definitions, the defining factors that society uses to group them. And and then of course we go into how putting them in boxes does reflect something, but not everything about them. So I have them do an identity mapping exercise individually. I have them really share stories about themselves and times they were proud of their identity. Other times maybe they felt embarrassed by their identity or targeted for their identity. And other times when they, I try to get them sharing personal experiences, first in writing and then with a partner and then in small groups. And then, of course, we go through the reading and we have small group discussions with prompts. Either I provide them or they read and ask and write questions on their reading and bring those back to small group discussions. And then I have them really do a kind of a, what does it mean to have a culture? And what are the descriptors of culture? And I have them compare values in different cultures and generalizing only to the point that we see some commonalities, but always emphasizing individuality within any group. And in my class, they also practice writing about themselves and what they're learning, and then when we're in the third of our class where we're looking at others, they do write a research paper about an identity group different than their own, and they delve into what culturally responsive pedagogies and practices are available to be more sensitive to the needs of learners from this group or the potential needs of learners from this group. So the last third of our class is